Hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis, and this is Startup Basics, a new series presented by our friends at WSGR. Yes, that's the amazing law firm, Wilson Sonsini, that is in Silicon Valley and many other cities. They do a wonderful job, and we were having lunch, and we were recapping all the success we've had over the years with doing the Launch Festival and This Week in Startups. And we thought to ourselves, how could we really help startups and entrepreneurs in 2014? And the best answer we could come to was answering their very basic questions, because my friends over there, Todd and other attorneys over there, we answer the same questions over and over again. So we thought, wouldn't it be great if these were just in a video where you could pull them up anytime on your phone, when you're on the bus, wherever, and just hear some frank advice. Now, this is a difficult one to do in a way, because it's about a negative time, a negative event in most people's estimation. The time when you have to fire somebody. It is incredibly challenging as an entrepreneur to deal with this issue, especially when you're young and you haven't done it before. Many people will have a panic attack, won't be able to sleep, will run to the bathroom and puke, will have their knee bouncing up and down under the table when they have to do this. And you don't have to feel that way. Firing somebody is typically a great relief for the person you're firing. Let me say that one more time. Most of the time when you fire somebody, it's a relief to them. And in truth, if you're doing it for good reasons, it is a great learning opportunity for them and for you. Because anytime you are firing somebody, two things have occurred. That person has not met your expectations, and you did not hire a person who could meet your expectations, or some combination of that. You did a bad job hiring, and or they did a bad job at their job. Now, when it gets to a senior executive, then it's even more pronounced, because you have no excuse. If you're hiring somebody who's worked for 10, 20, 30 years at another company, and they've done a great job at those other companies and their references checked out, well, then what happened here? We're all fallible. Everybody makes mistakes. You might not have managed the person perfectly. You may not have given them instructions on how to do their job properly. You may have hired the wrong person, or you may have thought you needed a skill set that you don't. So the first thing to do when you're going to fire somebody is to just stop for a second and do some analysis privately of, did we hire the right person to begin with? And how did we get here? So number one, you should go back and talk to the people who interviewed that person and say, and this is before firing or after, but I would say generally before, when we interviewed Jason for the job as host of This Week in Startups, did it ever come up that he doesn't really like to listen to other people's input? Did it come up that he has a temper? Did it come up that he shows up to work late? And did it come up that he can be abrasive at times with his feedback to people and roll his eyes? Did all those things come up? I'm just making these things up, okay? These are not real cases. It's hypothetical situation. And if they did come up in the references, well then, gosh, you guys as a team have something to learn. Listen to the references. And I force in my companies there to be 3 references. And I force those references to be checked in full before we ever make an offer. And I pre-check what the salary expectations are, so we do not get into the trap that I see so many people get into, which is they fall in love with a candidate so much, they're so sold on them that they don't believe the references. Or even worse, they don't do the references, or they do some of the references because they really want to get an ass in that seat to get the job done. That's the mistake typically. So when you're firing somebody, you got to do a bunch of introspection and say, what happened here? Now, you should talk to your HR department about all the legal issues around firing somebody. I'm just talking in generalities about my experience. Your experience may be different, so there's a huge legal disclaimer here around all this stuff. But there is no disclaimer around having done your proper research when hiring somebody. And I always insist that that person do the same. Before you take my investment dollars as an angel investor, I ask people, do you want to speak to a couple of the companies I've invested in, including some of the companies that have failed? And when I interact with those companies, because I work for them in a way, in a very literal way, I always think, God, in my worst day as an angel investor, what did I do, and how would that come across in a reference? And when situations go bad, how does that come across, right? So always there should be a double reference check going on. And an easy reference check is, here are 3 or 4 people in our company, go meet with them one-on-one and have a discussion. That's the kind of stuff that will avoid people having to be fired. Now, there are many reasons why people get fired. If we're talking about fraud or stealing or sexual harassment or any kind of malfeasance or misbehavior, I am a one strike you're out boss. You are not there to try to change people. Unless, of course, you're their therapist. You happen to have hired them for your startup and you happen to also be on the side, their personal therapist or career coach. It is not your job to try and fix people. I tell you this in such an emphatic way because I tried to do this in my 20s. I thought, I'm a psychology major, I can read people, I have high emotional intelligence, I'm smart. If somebody's not getting the job done, I can get inside their head, I can be their coach, I can be Pat Riley or Phil Jackson, and I can motivate them. Not gonna work. Somebody grows up for 20 years in a certain household with certain parents or certain little idiosyncratic behaviors, and you think in your spare time as the founder of your company that you're gonna be able to change them? It's not going to happen. And if it does, it's going to be a bizarre relationship where you're trying to get inside people's head and make them into something they're not. Hire great people, check their references, and if they do something that is on, this side of ethics, they have to go immediately. And it's a very quick conversation. Jason, we are in this room to inform you that we're letting you go. That's it. You don't have to give a reason. You don't even have to give a reason. They get asked 1,000 questions. In all likelihood, you live in a state and a country that has at-will work. So a person can leave the company at any time, and you can have somebody leave. And you can just say, it's not a fit. It's not a culture fit. You don't have to get into all the details. And when you get into all the details, I think that's when things get very emotional and gets kind of messy. And so I had a situation. I'm going to tell you about a situation. I'm going to change a bunch of the facts around so that you wouldn't know what company it was or any of that stuff. But this is a kind of a situation. Somebody harasses somebody at work. And I called my HR friend or recruiter and I said, hey, how do I deal with this? Because I was a young person. And she said, here's what you do. You go into the room with another person, with HR or another senior executive, and you tell the person that it's not working out, that you heard about this situation and it's not acceptable, and that you think there's a better opportunity for this person somewhere else, but we no longer are going to have a position for them here at this company. And they have 2 choices. Here, in this envelope, are 2 weeks of severance. If you would like to resign right now and move on to your next adventure, we can give you these 2 weeks severance, and it can be your decision. If not, we are going to fire you right now with no severance, and Joe is going to walk you to your desk to collect your belongings, and we wish you all the luck in the world. That's it. And boy, if you do that, no person wants to be fired, and everybody would love 2 weeks of severance. So go ahead, give them the severance. They feel good about it. You can even have them sign some forms on the way out. Talk to your HR and legal people about that. Sometimes people want to do non-disclosures on the way out. You should have that on the way in anyway. And some people like to do exit interviews. I'm not a huge fan of those because I think the exit interviews are typically like, especially when somebody's being fired, they're so biased it doesn't really matter. The more important thing to do is to examine why you hired them. How do you tell the other employees? This is critical, and this is where management needs to act. You have to act in a very deliberate fashion, in an honest way, without getting into detail, which is hard, isn't it? So, hey everybody, Susan is no longer with the company. This was not her decision, it was our decision. We felt there were things about her performance here that weren't up to our standards. We wish her all the best luck in the world. And if anybody has any questions about it, because we know Susan was popular, that's something we're willing to discuss offline, and you can email HR or myself to discuss it later. And then that's it. Now, if there's a teaching opportunity where like the person stole or they got drunk at a party and were inappropriate, you can add that. And you have to think about that, but if it was something everybody knew anyway, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Again, always consult your attorneys and your HR people. But hey, I know this is very hard for people, and people have heard that Jason got really drunk at the Christmas party and he said a bunch of inappropriate things. We really can't tolerate that kind of behavior, and it doesn't represent the company, so we let him go. This was very hard for us to do. We never like to fire anybody, and certainly we're all embarrassed about what happened, but we feel pretty good that this is the right thing to do. And usually, again, the person who's being fired is sometimes delighted or relieved, and sometimes it takes a couple of days after the shock for that to happen. And then other times, I've had teams come to me and say, why did it take you so long? Everybody knows who the a-hole in the company is. Everybody knows who the slacker in the company is. It's so apparent to the people in your company who's not pulling their weight or who's not appropriate for the culture that when you do let them go, it's like a sigh of relief for anybody and everybody. And so be clear about it. Do you have to offer a severance package? No, I don't think so. But I will say this. You do have to think about your own issues when it comes to firing people. And you don't want to bring your own baggage to it. So what I've seen in a lot of cases is they hire somebody, they don't do a good job for 6 weeks, and the person who paid them for those 6 weeks, the owner of the business, the CFO, their direct manager, whoever it is, feels like we got screwed. Oh my God, they worked for us for 6 weeks, we got screwed, and we wasted all that money, and you somehow want to get that back, right? Don't sweat it. Don't sweat the small stuff. If the person didn't do a great job, if they tricked you, if they lied, if they were a remote worker working on another project when they were supposed to be working for you, you don't need to get your pound of flesh from them. You don't need to get in a huge fight with them. It's wasted energy. The fact that you got them out of your company is a huge reward for you. And you can't put a price on that. It's like there's a great scene in Mean Streets where, it's a great Scorsese film, where somebody loans money to a guy and the guy doesn't pay him back. And he's all upset. And the other guy says, you know what? That guy's been dodging you. You hate that guy. You paid $20, you lent him $200 and now you never have to see him again? You got a good deal. I don't know the exact wording. You can look it up on Mean Streets. Great film. Let's talk about references. This is where it gets sticky. I'll tell you what I do. I don't ever want to say anything bad about anybody. I don't ever want to limit somebody's future options, but it does get complicated if your friend, a very good friend, says to you, I want to hire this person. They worked for you. And let me tell you, this happens to me because I'm a little bit high profile now. It didn't happen in the first 10 years of my career, but I can tell you it happens in the last 10 years. If you worked at one of my companies, people tend to know that I'm the CEO of it, and I have a pretty easy email address to guess. So my friends say, this person worked for you. They applied for this position. Should I hire them? If it's a great person, I will go to the end of the earth to get them a job. In fact, I've had people leave my company, they give enough notice, and it's a nice breakup. If it's not a nice breakup, that's a different story. But if they give enough notice, I will actually tell them, thank you for your service. Give me 5 companies you want to work at and why, and I will personally reach out to the CEOs. So I sort of take references to another level, which is if you dedicated a year or 2 or 3 or whatever it is to my startup, I'm going to go to bat for you. I want to see you succeed because it is a small world. And if you go to bat for the people who worked for you, they're going to come back to work for you. And I've had people do 2nd and 3rd tours with me and do some great work. And so you want to really be a champion of your future, of your past employees because they could be your future employees. Just treat everybody well. Now, what about if the person had done something illegal in your company or they really sucked and you think they're going to damage your friend's company? Oh boy, most companies feel like you do not want to give a bad reference because you might be liable. I don't know the legal issues around that. I've never heard it come to pass. What I do is something very simple. Either I give a tremendous reference or I'm not available to give a reference. It's a very mild way of saying I'm not comfortable giving a reference, but I don't say that because that could squirrel out of the person. I'm just not available to give a reference at this time. The other person can read into it what they will, but I'm not available to give a reference. And that means I don't reply to the email or I don't reply to the call. I just delete it. You don't have an obligation to reply and to give a reference. And the other person, if they are a friend of yours and you don't give a reference, well, that should speak volumes as well, right? And so I think that's a delicate way to handle it. Now, what are the best practices if you're the one getting fired? Okay, number 1, it's a learning experience. you will get fired at some point in your career. It's inevitable. It happens to everybody. If you get fired, I know this is hard to say, but take a deep breath and don't take it super personal. You're going to have to think about what were the circumstances under which you took the job, and how did you disappoint the boss and the team, or how was it not a culture fit, and what can you learn from it, and what can you take away from it? That's basically what firing is. Firing is the world telling you either you suck, or you didn't do your best work, or you're not a culture fit, one of these things. So really do some introspection as to why that happened. Now, suing, trying to keep your job, these are generally a waste of time. Because if you are trying to keep your job and they want to fire you, that's like somebody breaking up with you and then dating another person, and then you go to them like, I know you left me for that person, but come back to me. It's like so desperate and unnecessary. Like the person made a choice to not be with you. They don't love you, they love this person. It's pathetic for you to try to keep that relationship going, and it's also kind of weird and dysfunctional. If somebody doesn't want you, go find somebody who wants you. Now, there are exceptions here. If you feel you were discriminated against, if you feel you didn't get a fair shake, or they could have done a better job, there's a range of unfair firings. And if it's an unfair firing, there is proper legal recourse, and you should pursue it. And in 9 times out of 10, it results in a settlement. I've seen it many times. Somebody feels they were inappropriately fired, they get an attorney, and the cost of working that all out is $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in legal bills, and every company has insurance for this, and then somebody gets written a check that's worth $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, some percentage of a year of their salary typically, and the insurance company pays for it, the company doesn't pay for it. So if that does happen to your company and it's unfair, you didn't discriminate, you didn't harass the person, it wasn't an unfair firing, just pay the $5,000 deductible for your insurance and learn from it and move on. If it was your fault, hey, that's a whole different story. Then you need to really get help and figure out why your dysfunctional organization did something that resulted in you being sued successfully. But generally in life, and what makes the United States such a great country is that we have a fluidity in employment. In other countries, France, Scandinavian countries, you have to create a case, go to a court, and basically fight for sometimes years to fire somebody from your own company. That's why France doesn't make great companies, because they don't have a fluidity of talent. That's why a lot of these countries in Europe and other countries have protected the workers so much that they've created a dysfunctional state. It's better if everybody can choose where they work and an employer can choose who gets to work for them. It does have sometimes unfair firings, but what it leads to is a fluidity of startups where somebody can start a company, fail, everybody gets fired, and they start again. In other countries, it's very hard, and you try one business model, you hire 10 people who are designers because you have a design-based model. Then you realize, oh, we have to go to an enterprise model. We don't need the designers anymore. We need just one. You can't fire the 9 designers, so you can't pivot the business model because pivoting the business model requires recalibrating the staff. That's why it doesn't work in other countries. That's why we're the greatest country in the world when it comes to this stuff. There are times when it fails. I cannot lie. That does happen. But the legal system here works pretty well. In fact, most people would argue that the legal system works too often and that people unfairly abuse it. So that's a lot of information for you. If there's any doubt about a person in your company, there's generally no doubt you should fire them. That's just a general rubric. If people are like, this person really doesn't fit, and you get 2 or 3 people saying that, they don't fit. Get rid of them. I mean, obviously, do your diligence and be considerate about it, but your gut is generally right. You got to learn from these mistakes, and you got to be better at hiring. We take a long time when we hire people at my companies, and if we have to fire somebody, we look very deeply in the mirror and say, why did this not work out? And how do we, the employer, learn from it? Be blunt, be frank, but you don't need to be mean and you don't need to be personal. That's, again, a rookie mistake. If you're young and you're firing somebody, just say it's not a fit. Or I think there's a better place for you. And they say, oh, please tell me why, what? And you say, yeah, listen, I just don't think it's a fit. Like, your skill and how we work, it's just a different kind of thing, and you're going to be happier somewhere else. You don't need to lay into the person and say, you're passive aggressive, you're this thing, you're that thing, because you know what? Most of the time you're going to be projecting anyway. or you're wasting time. Get back to work. Let that person move on to their next adventure. Take the emotion out of it. And if you're not able to handle these things, you need to build a proper department and a proper process for doing so. Have a great COO or a VP of operations, a great HR company, an outsourced HR company. Make sure you do things in a button-up and fair fashion and learn from your mistakes. And really, when you have to fire somebody, it's probably because you made a mistake in hiring and it's on you. That's the one thing I want you to get from this. That firing people is almost universally a failure of management to hire the right person and do their diligence through references. This has been, I think, really great for me, this series, because it's really helped me get clarity of thought on a lot of these issues. Thanks so much to my friends at Wilson Sonsini for supporting this. And frankly, Wilson Sonsini has supported so many great things for entrepreneurs, from the Launch Festival to other people's conferences to other people's podcasts. So they're just a great group. If you're a startup, I 100% recommend you use Wilson Sonsini as your attorneys. I send them literally dozens of companies a year, and I've never heard anything but amazing feedback on the team at Wilson Sonsini. So thank you to them. And tune in again to some of the other things we're going to talk about, like raising money or picking a name for your company. We've got a lot of topics to discuss on Startup Basics, and this is but one. See you next time.